And Doug, we're going to turn things over to you. Let's welcome Doug O'Brien from NCBA CLUSA.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Nick, I might ask for a little bit of help if you can do it. The camera, all I can see is the chandeliers right now. There we go. Oh, I like to see people. Okay, that's a lot better. I appreciate that. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with the Kansas Farmers Union. I really wish I could have been there to enjoy the bison and the chili, and much more so to enjoy your company and to learn from you and what you're going through these days, and learn about what the Kansas Farmers Union has in store in 2025. But I can't, and part of the reason I can't, and I'll get into it just a little bit, is that as Nick mentioned, I'm on my way to New Delhi, India, for a global conference with cooperatives from all over the world. I sit on the board of the International Cooperative Alliance, which might be a way for me to kind of walk into talking about the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International. I'm the president and CEO. And NCBA CLUSA has been around since 1916, so for 108 years. And our mission is to defend, develop, and protect the cooperative business enterprises. Our vision is to help more people use cooperatives to build a more inclusive economy. Okay, so that's what we do. Now, what's that really mean? Well, here in Washington, D.C., it means we're an association that does advocacy. So we've got a presence on Capitol Hill, at USDA, at the Small Business Administration, Department of Labor, and other places. We spend time educating and advocating on behalf of cooperatives. We have partnered with the Farmers Union for, I think, and I need to wrestle this to the ground, but I suspect that the National Farmers Union and NCBA CLUSA, and we were CLUSA for our first 80 years or whatever, but I suspect that we've been partnered almost the whole time. I know NFU started in 1916, right? 1912. Okay, all right, I got that, all right. Thank you for that correction. But we've had, you in the room, you know that triangle, the Farmers Union triangle, includes one point of cooperation. And I have to say and celebrate that the Farmers Union, as much as any national organization, understands just how important cooperation is to both the present and the future, farmers and rural communities, and you've really stood up for cooperatives over the years. In fact, Emma McCormick at NFU, the Senior Director for Education Engagement, she's on my board, and we've had members of the National Farmers Union on our board over the years, as long as I know about it anyway. So there's a lot of alignment between the Farmers Union and NCBA CLUSA, and Rob and I are always looking for ways to really make the most out of this relationship. Because what we have at NCBA CLUSA, so a lot of you know NCFC, the National Council of Farmer Co-ops. They're great. That's a sectoral association. That's just farmer co-ops. And we have farmer co-ops in our group, but we also have rural electric co-ops. We have credit unions. We have some of the farm credit institutions. We have housing cooperatives. We have worker cooperatives. And now these days we have technology cooperatives and on and on. So they're all under the big umbrella of NCBA CLUSA. We get to work with all of them. The work that we do, I mentioned we do advocacy and we do public awareness. Not enough people know about cooperatives. Not enough people know about this special kind of business where the members own, control, and benefit from the business. So we got to tell more people. And then we also do a lot of co-op development. So And we've done that co-op development not only here in the United States, but around the world. We've been in 90 countries over time, helping farmers mostly, but other people as well, use cooperatives to improve their lives, to create economic opportunities. Today, I want to talk mostly about the work here in the United States and how we engage with the international community. So, most of you, maybe I'll ask, and I can see at least a bunch of folks there straight ahead. I'm going to ask for a show of hands, how many folks are member of at least one cooperative? Okay, that'd be most. That's awesome. Thank you, number one. Number two, you should know that you join over 1 billion people in the world as part of the cooperative community and this cooperative movement. Here in the United States, 1 in 3 people are members of cooperatives, and that includes farmer cooperatives. Over half the farmers are members of farmer cooperatives. The 2 other great big sectors are rural electric cooperatives. There's about over 40 million, maybe 42 million people who own and control their own utility service. And then credit unions are actually the great big one. So there's over 110, 115 million people who are members of their own consumer bank. So you add those all up, and you got 1 in 3 people in the United States who are members of cooperatives. Across the world, and I'll just mention, because I'm heading to New Delhi in a couple of days tomorrow to meet with the International Cooperative Alliance. There is a really robust cooperative movement in India, and we helped in 1953. NCBA CLUSA helped this cooperative called the Indian Farmers Fertilizer Cooperative. It's federated, second line, and it does what it's a cooperative primarily of input for farmers. Of course, farmers in India, even today, most of them have parcels that are maybe 10 acres. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. But that one cooperative has 50 million farmers in it, if you can imagine. So, but that's something that we helped these farmers, and we can learn a lot from them, and I'm going to get to go over and hear about that. Nick mentioned the International Year of Cooperatives. So last year, about exactly a year ago, the U.S. government joined governments from across the world at the United Nations to proclaim 2025 as the International Year of the Co-op. And the reason they did it, in their big, flowery, long, bureaucratic language, but the reason they did it is these leaders from across the world realized that cooperatives are a fantastic strategy to help people solve some big problems. And we've got some big problems across the world. We've got problems around hunger and housing and access to clean water, making sure that women and young people are treated fairly and treated with respect. And people understand, these leaders understood that one of the best ways, if not the best way, to address these problems is to help people create and sustain cooperatives. And it's that power of one person, one vote within the business that makes sure that business is responsive, not only to the members, but to the community. Because the members live in these local communities, it's more likely the co-op is going to act like a good business, like a good business citizen, and you're going to get better outcomes. That's what the research tells us. That's what folks really know. So we got this, this proclamation that it's the 2025, it's the year of co-op. So what do we do about it? Well, I can tell you, here at NCBA CLUSA, we're going to make the most of it. We're already putting together a bunch of materials that really shows in a compelling way the impact that cooperatives make on the economy and in society. And that's coming out in January. Then we're going to create a toolkit so that folks like the Kansas Farmers Union and others, that you can take this information and you can help tell the story. Tell the story to your neighbors, tell the story to the state legislature, to the governor, to other folks, to your congressional delegation, so that they understand just how powerful co-ops can be. And so we get better policy. What kind of policy are we talking about? We're talking about more resources to help people develop cooperatives. We're talking about making sure that cooperatives can access financing so that they can grow and that they can thrive. We're talking about making sure that that more people have the ability to put these cooperatives together to solve problems. And when we think about some of these problems, where co-ops can really be impactful today. And I take this string, I think about it, I've had a chance to study it some now. When you think about what cooperatives have done in the United States over time, from the 19th to 20th century, farmers in the Midwest and across the country, they were facing an economy that was really changing on them. We were moving from an agrarian economy to a more industrial economy, and there were certain actors in the agriculture sector that had a lot of power. Those are the railroads, the folks who are buying grain, the livestock monopolies. And farmers at that time, and this is the first time in the United States when co-ops really took off, a lot of these farmers knew what co-ops were because it came over from Northern Europe, whether that was Germany or Finland or Norway or these places where co-ops had already been around for a couple generations. And so you got these farmers who see that they're getting trapped, that they don't have any bargaining power, and they might not even have access to get their grain to market. And so the farmers, they're like, we know what to do about this. And they began to form cooperatives. And not only did they form cooperatives, they went to Congress and said, Congress, make some laws so it enables us to get together and have a say in our economic livelihood. And that's Capper-Volstead Act, eventually that's Subchapter T, that's 521 co-ops. It's all these laws don't come from nowhere. They come from people who understand the importance of how a policy ecosystem can support what people really need to do. In this case, come together to have more power in their economy. So that works for farmers. Now fast forward about a generation, and 90% of the people in the cities had access to electricity in 1930. 10% of people on farms and rural places had access to electricity. This is in 1930. So 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gets elected president. He does have a vision of pushing out access to electricity into the rural places. The first thing that the Roosevelt administration does is they write a richer subsidy in for the investor-owned utilities. And the investor-owned utilities, at this time there's no rural electric co-op, the investor-owned utilities, they sharpen their pencils and they pencil out and say, nah, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. We're not going to go out because it doesn't pencil out. Well, by this time, there's farmer cooperatives. There's farmers who are already organized into cooperatives, and they say, well, wait a second. We can make this work. And so they go for some of those dollars to help them build out the first rural electric co-op. And then they realize how transformational this could be. They get organized, they go to Congress and they say, create the REA, the Rural Electric Administration, create those programs. And within a generation, 90% of the farmers had access to electricity. And that was because people in rural places understood the power of cooperatives, and they partnered with the federal government to make it happen. And with those two stories in mind, just think about what can co-ops do today. And I think about, I can do probably 7 things, but I'm going to think about just 2 or 3 things. In rural places, there is an absolute crisis in what I'll call the care economy. And that's child care or home care, whether that's for older folks or people who might be handicapped. There is, not only a demand, but really an absolute necessity that for these economies to be able to operate, we need to make sure that there's a good place for the young kids to go, real young kids, and that the people that we care about most are taken care of. And a lot of them want to stay at home. Well, we've got these models of cooperative for care economy, and they could be a cooperative that's owned and controlled by the people who work, so it's a worker cooperative, or they could be essentially a consumer cooperative, so a family who's utilizing that child care center or that home care service. The families are members of cooperatives. There's examples. We've been working on them at NCBA CLUSA with a bunch of other folks over the last decade or two. But for that to really take off, we need better federal policy and some support. And I could envision that within 10 years or generations, we could look back and we'd say, we've got this, we've got to pretty much solve it. But U.S. Agency for International Development and groups like NCBA CLUSA, we help organize it. Essentially what it is that we're working with farmers in Peru, in Senegal, in Southeast Asia, and we're working with farmers or we're working with farmer cooperatives, and they have a need, and we identify that need, and it might be they want to improve their agronomy, or they might want to improve their bookkeeping, or they might want to learn about some conservation practice. And then we find somebody in the United States who can help them learn about that. So it might be a farmer, called farm to farmer. Sometimes it's another professional. But then that person from the US goes over for 2 to 4 weeks and just spends time in community with those bunch of farmers, helping them, providing technical assistance essentially. In farm to farmer, we take care of everything. So we do all the logistics in the planning. We pay for the plane tickets. We pay for the boarding. The taxpayers do because it's the U.S. Agency for International Development, but it's all taken care of. We help with that. If you need an interpreter, we line that up as well. But what you need to give is your expertise and your time. So we don't pay you for the 2 to 4 weeks. That you've got to give that. But that's farm to farmer, and instead it changes lives. And as whoever it was who said it, we do great things for the farmers in that developing country. But what we hear more is that the people who came back, they learned a lot more, and they're transformed. They're like, oh, okay, you get a different way of looking at life, and there's no substitute for that. So that's farm to farmer. If anybody in the room or you think you know anybody who might be interested, please let me know. Nick's got the contact information. That's farm to farmer. Okay, so we talked about how co-ops solve a couple of great big problems in rural America in the early 20th century. And then we talked about what problems can be solved today by cooperatives. The care economy is number one. A second one is that a lot more people are focused on these days is housing. So, and that could be cooperative housing at market rate, or for a lot of people in our communities whose income isn't too big, it can be limited equity cooperative housing. So that housing stock, it could be a 4-plex or an 8-plex, and essentially what happens is there's some type of subsidy at the beginning of that housing development, and then there's a guarantee that people can stay in that housing. They can gain equity over time, but it's going to be limited so that when they move out, it's still affordable for a low to moderate income coming up next. And we know, it's everywhere, whether it's rural places or suburban or urban places, that decent housing stock and access, particularly for lower income people, is a big deal. We've been doing a lot of work on limited equity cooperative housing here at NCBA CLUSA. And then the last thing, and because I really get wound up about this one, so I'm going to try and not go on too long, but it's about information and data. So I love when I'm talking to farmers about this one, because you guys get it, you live it, and women. The 100 years ago, when you were thinking about the value that's created on a farm, it was, 100 bushel of corn, 100 weight milk, and then you use the co-op to get the most value out of that as possible. And that might have meant you're aggregating it, and you've got your co-op that is a lot smarter in the market and get a better price for you. Might mean that your co-op, like in the case of dairy, was doing some level of processing and getting more value out of that value chain. So, okay, that's great. That's what the co-op is for. Today, farmers create a whole nother value chain from their farm. And that's the zeros and ones that are coming off, when you're going through the field and combine, and that monitor is catching that information and sending it out to someplace. Might be up to John Deere World, or to whoever owns, Pioneer DuPont, or to Monsanto, or whoever it is. They're getting that information, and they're creating value from that information. Some of that information, some of that value, they might give back to you, but some of it, they're keeping for themselves. That's the nature of, I don't even blame them. It's like, that's how they're designed. There are some cooperatives that are doing a good job at this, and others that are working at it, but I think it's something we have to think of as those who, and I grew up in a farm in Iowa, by the way. I'm no longer a farmer, but I still kind of got that big kid off the farm thing, that we got to think about. Our current cooperatives making sure that they're doing everything with our information possible to capture the most value. And by that I mean, are they helping you figure out, where to plant, how much to plant, where to put the fertilizer, where to put the herbicide? And as we continue to get with more and more precision agriculture, are they helping you, do that in a way that's really smart? Are they helping you figure out some market dynamics with that information? So those are three places I think about what can we do with co-ops today that could really make a difference for not only people on farms and rural places, but across the United States. Just a few ideas to kind of to get you thinking. And I guess to finish this part of the remarks, and then I'll finish up pretty quickly. If any of these ideas are to take off, then we have to, as a cooperative community, and I count the Farmers Union as part of the cooperative community, we have to come together, and we need to go to Congress, we need to go to the state legislature to help make it happen. That's how co-ops have happened before. They made sure that the policy ecosystem is supporting this vision, and we'll have to do it again. So NCBA CLUSA stands ready, to do that. So I'll end, and I got time for questions if you want, Nick. I don't know, however you want to do it. But it is November 20th, and something happened about 15 days ago that you might have caught in the news. There was an election. And I've been focused, we've been spending a lot of time and energy on it here in Washington, D.C., thinking about what it all might mean. And I think this one's going to be pretty consequential. In any time, and I'm going to stay away from being partisan, but any time that you get one party that's all lined up, and now we've got one party that's in the White House, and in both the House and the Senate, that party's got a lot of leeway to do a bunch of stuff. And the party that came in and kind of ran the table here, they've been pretty clear about their priorities and their ideas. And they're going to be able to do at least some of it. And it's going to have a real impact in farm country and in rural places and across the country. I think it's across the board. I'll speak I'm just going to start and talk, and maybe I'll end and talk just about cooperatives, because we could talk about immigration, we could talk about tariffs, we could talk about what might happen to some of the programs that were launched in the last 4 years. I'm going to talk a little bit about just cooperatives. next year, 2025, is a big year for a tax policy conversation. I'm sure lots of you know. The big tax bill from 2017, there's a bunch of that bill that some of the provisions are going to sunset in 2025, or the end of 2025. That's a forcible event for Congress. That's about the only time Congress can ever do anything is when there's a forcible event. Sometimes they can't even do that. We can talk about the Farm Bill. But with that tax bill, that means that some of you might know about this section called 199A that impacts how farmer cooperatives can pass down deductions to its members. So that one, it will sunset at the end of next year, and the farm cooperative community has made it a real priority to make sure it gets extended. The tea leaves say, well, that's probably more likely it's going to get extended now. Okay, that's good for farmers and farm cooperatives. In another way, when there's a great big tax conversation, when it rises to this level, and this new administration is looking to spend a bunch of new money on some of its priorities, then it's going to be looking for what's called pay for it, like how are they going to pay for it? And cooperatives are taxed only at one level, either at the co-op level or at the member level, and that's credit unions, that's rural electric cooperatives. And we as a cooperative community need to make sure that those who might be looking for pay for it, they don't come looking at that cooperative tax treatment. And so that's something we're really focused on, hanging together, make sure that doesn't get touched. There's some other places in terms of appropriations that could get hit. And then I'll just end and talk maybe just a bit about Farm Bill. You probably have other people next is tracking them more closely than me, probably. Conventional wisdom is it will get extended into next year. Probably, maybe, they talk about for the whole year, maybe into September 30 or so at least folks get a whole nother season, you know what you're dealing with. I think there was a glimmer of hope that a deal would be struck by, in this lame duck by the end of the year, but I think that is pretty much disintegrated this year, but I guess never say never. But that means next year there's a different group of leaders in town, and their priorities are going to come through that next Farm Bill. And that's mixed for farmers, I think. It's a mixed deal depending on where you sit and see how you see things. But there's definitely some things that are, some of the programs that were in the last Farm Bill, they're going to be threatened, particularly probably some of the local, regional, small farm kind of stuff. It's not going to be as big a priority. But then some of the Title I support is loan levels, etc., that those might get increased perhaps. The way that the federal government thinks and talks about climate, that's going to change. And I think they're still going to talk a lot about conservation and about resilience. But how that comes out in federal programs, that's probably going to be a little bit different too. We could go down that path a little bit, but elections have consequences. And as groups that care about the future of our communities, and our, and really the future of our children, I guess it's on us to navigate these consequences, to the best way possible and look toward the future. So I'll end it there, except to say thank you to all the work that you're doing. I know that choosing to take a day or two or three away from the farm and your family that's a big choice. Kansas Farmers Union can't do it without people like you making that choice. And thanks for doing that. And I look forward to working with you, towards better communities and stronger cooperative communities, especially in the future. So Nick, thanks.
Let's give Doug a big round of applause.